Everyone, welcome to tonight's session. We'll wait for a few more minutes for everyone to join in with us, but we're so thrilled that you could be here. It's great to see people popping into the chat to say hi. Wonderful. Alrighty, friends, we've ticked over 7 o'clock, so we are going to get started. My name is Kate Highfield, and I'm so thrilled to be with you this evening as we start to consider technology in our services. So hopefully you can see my screen, because we are going to start to think about how we use technology in our services, in our family daycare context. Friends, I'm not going to be monitoring the chat tonight. I will be monitoring Q&A. So if you have any questions that you're dying to ask me, please pop them into the Q&A button. So friends, as we start this evening, I'd like to acknowledge the lands on which we are all meeting tonight. So I'm joining you from the University of Canberra, so I'm on Ngunnawal lands. And I would particularly like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues and friends have been educating children on these lands for thousands and thousands of years. So as you take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which you are zooming in from tonight, I'd encourage you to consider two things, both the elders past and present, and also the country that you are standing on. At the University of Canberra, we are very interested in being in all of the ways that we can care for country. I'd particularly like to acknowledge this amazing artwork by Gary Purchase tonight, because the art that comes from country is quite phenomenal. So friends, you should have received a document. Those of you who registered this evening should have received this one. So did you receive the resource book? PD in Your Pocket is proudly funded by the New South Wales government, and it's such an amazing resource that you literally can carry professional development around in your pocket, on your phone, on your device. This particular topic booklet was sent out about a week ago. If you didn't receive it, you can use the link on the screen, so nswfdc.org.au/PD in your pocket, and download that link. In particular, there are a few extra resources available in that booklet that are hard for me to show live, but we've been able to pre-record some sections in there. Just a reminder that after tonight's session, you will be invited to fill in a survey. And me personally, Kate, I value that feedback so immensely. If I say something wrong or do something offensively, please pop it in the chat. But this is funded by the New South Wales government, with the survey giving really important data. So our sector, early childhood, and in particular family daycare, relies on that amazing funding that comes through. So please, friends, take a moment to fill in that survey. And I've been asked to give you a huge thank you to all of the people who already filled in last month's survey. You'll also get, after tonight, for those of you participating live, a certificate of participation, which is great for you if you're looking to build your portfolio in that space. So if you haven't received your certificate of participation in about a week, please make sure that you take a moment to check your junk mail. And if not, please contact professional services at newsouthwalesfamilydaycare.org.au, NSWFDC. You know what that means. I'm sure you've had many emails from that team before. So as you registered, we learnt from you, and I should probably introduce myself at this time. My name's Associate Professor Kate Highfield, and I'm joining you from the University of Canberra, where I have the honour of being the academic lead of early childhood. You, my friends, as I can see, are joining us from all over New South Wales, so we're so thrilled that you are here with us. As you registered for tonight's survey, we heard from you, and I'm pretty excited about what we heard from you, because knowing where you're coming from is such an important part of the work we do. So the first thing we asked was, how confident are you in using technology in your personal life? You see, friends, if you are confident using technology in your personal life, then it will have a direct impact on how you use technology in your professional life. So 39% of you said that you are very confident. I'm hoping we've got some amazing TikTokers and YouTubers in here. 57% of you said somewhat confident. And about 4% of you said not confident at all. So my 4% friends, hopefully tonight you'll walk away with something that you can embed in your family daycare situation. The next question we asked was, how confident are you in using technology with children? Are you very confident, somewhat confident, or not confident at all? And friends, I'm hoping you're noticing that we can see a very strong link between personal lives and professional lives. This time round, a few more said they weren't so confident using technology with children. Now, to me, that's really exciting data. I'm a bit of a data nerd. That's what all academics are, I think. And I'm really excited about that data because what it shows us is that we can jump on in and be co-learners with the children we're working with. For me, the richest learning occurs when we can co-engage and co-build. So maybe for those of you who are in the not confident at all box, you might jump in and do some co-learning with the children you are working with. To me, that's an exciting opportunity. We also asked how often you use technology with children in your service, in your setting. And about 31% of you said most days, 35% of you said most weeks. Interestingly, 33% said rarely, and 1% said never. Now, if you are a never person, I am so glad you are here with us tonight because we have this chance to really think about how we carefully and intentionally use technology. We're not talking about overusing technology, but we are recognizing that for these young children, technology is here to stay, and how we use the technology is such an important piece. So, friends, the last question we asked, I think this is the last question, was, do you or the families that you work with have concerns with using technology with the children? And this was interesting to me, and I'm actually quite excited about this. 17% of you said you or your families have concerns, yes. 5% said lots of concerns, 42% said some concerns, and 36% said no concerns. Now, having concerns is really important because when we talk about using technology in a healthy way, we actually need the concerns so that we can reflect and really think carefully about how we use technology well. So, what are we covering tonight? And guys, we've got a lot to cover. So we are going to look at exploring technology within your service as a tool in the educational program, but also as a communication tool. I'm really hoping that we can look at tech worries, explore your concerns and ways to overcome them. And we can look at how technology is constantly evolving. We'll have a quick look at research and policy. I did say I'm an academic nerd and I can't not share some research with you. And we'll look at key ideas for effective use of technology in the classroom. We'll hear from an amazing educator, Jocelyn, and I'm so thrilled that she has been able to share with us. And we'll look at some great tools to cover. If the technology works well, we'll also have a bit of a show and tell session where I'll show you some apps and how to use them. So friends, welcome. Welcome to this evening. I really hope you find some things that you would like to take home with you. So, tech worries. Who's got some tech worries? I'm going to pop into the chat. Tell me, what are the tech worries you have? What do you worry about as you're considering using technology in your service? What concerns you in that space? I'm sure that there's a few that worry you. So some of the things that worry people normally are the idea of too much screen time. We worry about this idea of time. And it comes from an idea that we are concerned about taking away from other valuable things. So when I worry about screen time, and yes, my friends, I do worry about screen time, the first thing I really worry about is when a child is using screens, that they might lose social skills, or they might be using screens in isolation. And I think it's very, very important here that when we think about the screens that we use, that we don't use small screens. So a small screen, and I'm just holding up my phone here, a small screen is an isolating device. Only one child can use this screen at a time. So when I'm talking about screens, we need to think about ways that we can use the technology together, whether that's using a larger tablet that multiple children can gather around, or whether that's projecting your device up onto a larger screen so that we can work together. So for me, it absolutely is a risk that children could be isolated when they're using technology. But part of our job as the educator in the room is to be modeling appropriate tech use and to be facilitating tech use that is not isolating. So in my space, I often say children should not be using devices alone. In fact, if you're working with children at home in your own family, I would say no tech away. So tech has to be in a shared space, a family room. And for me, with my daughter, no tech in the bedroom. But I'd also like to encourage you to think about ways that you can promote social interaction using the technology. So in particular, how are you helping children to use the technology well and to use the technology to collaborate? So I've got an iPad here, but this could be any screen device. And what's really important here is that we use an opportunity to share the findings, the things we are doing, with others. So if you've got a smart TV in your centre, you could be sharing up through your smart TV. If you don't, you could be plugging in to your television or to your projector system so that you are enabled to use this together. It's also really important that as we are using devices, that we are talking about what we're seeing. So if you've got a child, or hopefully two children, looking at the screen, that you're actively engaging in that space. This is not a digital babysitter, but it becomes part of the conversation you have. What are you watching? What did you notice? How did you play that? Would you like to teach Sarah how to do that, etc.? This idea of co-engagement is vital because it takes us beyond a socially isolating device into using the devices well. The next big issue for me is the risk of accessing inappropriate content or accessing advertising. I worry about advertising particularly because children under the age of 8 often can't tell the difference between what is advertising and what is real content. To that end, me, not the New South Wales government, but Kate Highfield, really focuses in on using apps that we pay for so that we are avoiding advertising. I also make sure that if I'm playing a YouTube video, and yes, there is some great YouTube content, that I pre-watch the video and I skip through the advertising. It's important to me that I would never show content to children that was online, for example, through YouTube, without first watching it and verifying it. It is absolutely vital that we keep our children safe, and that, my friends, is our responsibility as the adults. So we know that children are susceptible to advertising, and in particular, children are very susceptible to food advertising. So ideally, we would skip through that. I would also like to put in a real plug for the work of ABC Kids and ABC Early Childhood in particular, because they have created some brilliant content without the advertising. Lastly, friends, I do want to throw out that we know that some family daycare educators choose to show television while children are eating. And that research from the University of Wollongong is particularly worrying, because if a child is watching a screen, they will consume more calories than they need to. So friends, that advertising risk is really high, and obviously the risk of inappropriate content. So preview and make sure that you are not accidentally enabling that. Friends, we also worry about this idea of too much screen time, and you know your families best. You know that you might have families that are watching too much screen time at home. In which case, in conversation with your families, you might say, look, we're not going to have any screens in our setting. In my family daycare, we might just limit that completely. This is why you are the educator. You are leading on this technology journey. If you do worry particularly about screen time, many of us worry about the link between screen time and sedentary behaviour. That is where children are sitting down too often. Now, that risk of sedentary behaviour is a risk that we do worry about, because we know that a child who is watching more screens is more likely to consume more calories, and they're more likely to be sitting down. But as you'll hear a little bit later, we can turn our screens around and use them to promote physical activity. So my favourite 4-year-old is currently fascinated with gymnastics. So we've been filming her gymnastics, and by gymnastics I mean climbing on the climbing frame in the local park. We've been filming that gymnastics and sharing it with mum and dad, so that we're using the videos to promote physical activity. So rather than just consuming media on the iPad, we're turning our iPad around to be creating media. So friends, screen time is a risk, and time is just one metric. We also need to focus in on quality here, which is where previewing, pre-checking the content, and really making sure that it aligns with our beliefs as teachers and our pedagogic values. It also has to align with the values of the families and children we're working with. We're not just throwing on the screen as a digital babysitter. We know that families find screen time limits one of the most challenging things. The Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne does a regular poll of parents, and screen time is one of the #1 issues that parents worry about with children. So modelling great screen time is really important, as is modelling good transitions away from screen time. So what is a worry for some of us, too much screen time, might actually be a blessing for the families you work with, because we can use this as a teachable moment, a moment where we help children transition away from the screens. So one of my favourite ideas with this is to have a lucky dip of ideas to do after screen time. And teachers, you know, as educators, how hard it is to transition from one activity to another. But having a grab bag of ideas that a child could pull out at the end of their screen time might be a way to model effective screen time transitions. I also, with some beautiful colleagues of mine, have written a piece on this for the conversation, where we talk about ways of transitioning away from screen time. And I'm happy to share that with you if you'd like to. What I love about this as family day carers is that we can model good transitions away from screen time. We can help children build healthy habits with screen time and give them a chance to know when it's time to turn off the screens, and of course to know what to do here. Another concern that we are very worried about is the idea of safety. I worry about images being shared inappropriately, and I worry about parents sharenting. Do you know about sharenting? Sharenting is when parents are sharing content about their child that may or may not be appropriate. Today, a friend of mine sent me something on YouTube where a child was absolutely, completely, totally and utterly dysregulated. She was having an absolute tantrum. But the parent, instead of choosing to parent in that moment, chose to film the video and upload it to YouTube. That is an example of sharenting. Sharenting is something that really concerns me about children's digital lives, because that particular child, she was about 3.5, having a meltdown, didn't need her mum or dad filming her. She needed her mum or dad to help co-regulate with her. And that child forevermore will have a digital footprint of her sobbing on the internet. When we worry about children's content online, what we're worried about is this idea of a digital footprint. What image of the child has been uploaded? And in particular, what image is available for the rest of their digital lives? You know, we've seen this happen as adults with memes that have been shared that then become used for bullying. But friends, as educators, we have to set the right tone. We have to take care to be modelling appropriate and safe use of technology. Of course, ASIQUA's recent announcement on child-safe projects is something that's really important, and there's a new component around child-safe practices that we have to consider as educators, where we are modelling really good and safe use of images, and I'll talk more about that in a few moments. What's really important for me here is that as the educators, we need to model keeping children safe online. We need to take care to very carefully moderate how we are sharing information, and we need to make sure that we know who we are sharing the information with. So friends, if you are using sharing images of children, think about the authenticity of those images and how safe it is to share those images. Oh my goodness, we're talking about all the negatives. I promise we're going to get to the positives in a moment. But for the moment, we have to overcome the issues so that we can know that we are coming into this from a safe space. We also worry about physiological concerns. So physiology, of course, is the science of our body. So I worry about eyesight. A child who is overusing screen time is at greater risk of developing myopia. Now, the solution to that is to make sure that children are having a really good screen break and that they're not overusing screens, that they've got good transitions away from screens. But the reality of that for us is also that we need to take care as adults. So one of the solutions there is this idea of the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, make sure you look at something at least 20 meters away for 20 seconds. And that's to make sure that our eye muscles are continuing to focus at different intervals. Now, believe it or not, that risk of myopia is just as much of a risk for those of us who read novels endlessly. And if you're like me and you often read them at nighttime in dim lighting, then the myopia risk is there for that as well. And it's not about the screens per se, but is about the focal length that we are holding our devices at. We also worry about fine motor skills. A child who's constantly tapping might not develop that pincer grip. To that end, I encourage you, whenever a child is making marks, to use a stylus. Now, I'm about to use my iPad, so I've got my Apple stylus here, but you can very cheaply purchase styluses that will work on your tablet or your phone. They are a low-cost device. I have some that came from Amazon that were about $1 for 10. Those rubber-tipped styluses in particular are something that I advocate for, because we are able to build that fine motor skill as a child is mark making. We also worry about gross motor skills. A child who is using a device for an extended period of time is at risk of not engaging in those physical activities that we know are so vital in childhood. They might not build up their core muscle strength, or perhaps they won't be outside in nature exploring the world as we are built to. To that end, I'd encourage you to look at some of the work that we have done with ABC and my colleagues in Young Children and Digital Society. That work has been really powerful, where children are playing back their physical activities and sharing those with close family members. watching back a video of you doing something, exploring your physical strength is an incredibly empowering way to explore physical activity and, in fact, to build our skills. One of the little boys I was recently working with has taught himself to skip by watching a video of him skipping. So the educator in this family day service had videoed children skipping as part of an obstacle course, and he noticed that most of the children were doing a step and a jump, a step and a jump, which is actually the skip movement. And he noticed that by watching back a video. So indeed, when used well, the technology can actually promote gross motor skills. We also worry, friends, about overpronating our neck. So if I hold my phone up, you can see that often I actually overstretch my neck. And that overstretching of your neck, or we call it an overpronation of our neck, is something that adults struggle with, and indeed children can struggle with if we allow the devices to be on a table or set down. So remember, friends, these devices are meant to be mobile. So put one of those fabulous tough cases on them. And if you're using them with children, give them a flexible way to use them. I particularly like to use devices on my tummy. If I'm holding the device if I'm lying on my tummy and holding the device with my arms, I'm able to build my core strength and use my upper body strength as I am engaging with the technology. So believe it or not, lying on the floor to use an iPad is a great way to build that physical strength. The last physiological concern that we have is a concern around hearing. And that concern around hearing is increased when children use headphones, particularly headphones that are actually designed for adults. So educators, you need to take care if you are using headphones, which is not something I advocate for children, except on a plane. But if you are using headphones, that you need to make sure that they are noise limiting headphones that are preset for children's ears. Children can't cope, nor can we actually, with high volume noise, and we need to be taking care with that. Now, I threw in a throwaway line then recently, just in that conversation. I said, I don't normally let children use headphones, and I certainly don't let children use headphones in the research work that I do or in the services I support. The reason we don't use headphones is that we really want to make sure that you are co-engaging and present in digital play. So as a child engages digitally, we want to make sure that you know what's going on and that you can step in as needed. It's very important that you are not letting the device become a digital babysitter. Now, friends, we also worry about some additional concerns, and in particular, I worry about our technology use as adults. Who uses Instagram or TikTok? Yep, I can see a few of you do. I'm guaranteeing some of you do. When we get into this culture of likes, there is a culture where every time someone likes our post, that we're getting a little dopamine hit. We are getting a chemical reaction in our bodies where we go, oh, great, someone liked it, someone liked it. And as adults, that is not great. We also know as adults that when your technology pings or buzzes in your pockets, that you become distracted. And in fact, it takes you a long time to refocus on what you were doing, particularly if you were in a lovely state of flow. So friends, I encourage you to become the master of your notifications. When you're working with children, turn them off. Unless there's an emergency, turn off your notifications. Don't let the bing or the buzz or the beep distract you from how you're engaging with children. And in particular, really take care with the likes that you are receiving on social media. Adults, I'm also going to remind you that social media is not real. We present a curated version of the world. We present a filtered version of the world or to the world that's not real. And that is really concerning, because if you're just looking at people online, and yes, there are some amazing educators online, you're only seeing the best of them. You're not seeing the moments where they've had a hard day. Okay, friends, we have talked for way too long about concerns. I'd like to now start to turn this conversation around, and I'd like to start to turning the negatives around into some positives. So one frame that we can do this is this idea where we consider that technology is a long flowing continuum. That continuum, and I will talk about this a few times tonight, this comes from my research, where we talk about where children consume media and content, where they create media and content, and where they communicate with media and content. So all of those negatives that we talked about, access to inappropriate advertising, access to inappropriate content, too much screen time, all of those concerns happen when children are consuming pre-made content or playing pre-made games. You see, as you're playing a pre-made game, and we've all done this before, maybe if you've been watching Netflix and you go into an episode after an episode after an episode, as we get into that state of flow with technology or media, it happens when we are consuming, and that's where we get sucked in to watching more or looking at more Instagram posts. When we consume content, either content that our friends are posting or content that has been pre-made, that's where the negative issues can occur. That's where we can be exposed to inappropriate content or see games that we're not ready to understand. That's where we can be exposed to advertising. So for me, consuming media is the time that we need to be most vigilant and most engaged. At the other end of the continuum is where we create. And there are some amazing apps, hopefully we'll get time to look at them tonight, where children become creators of their own content. They can jump in and create their own digital book or create a movie or create an animation. When you become a creator of content, you're not exposed to advertising, you're not exposed to inappropriate content, you're not getting into a state of flow. In fact, you become the owner of the technology. So for me, I like to focus right down in that creating zone. That creating zone is where things become really interesting to me. The final piece of the puzzle is communicating. And for me as a parent and for me as an educator, this is where technology becomes incredibly valuable. One of the services I've been working with in Canberra has a lot of families who are deployed, so mums or dads who are in the Army, Navy and Air Force, and so they are mandated to spend time overseas or in different areas. For those families, it's really hard to not be seeing your child every day. So what's amazing is that we can be using the technology even with very, very young children to be communicating and really sharing their content so that the family member who's deployed can still engage in what's going on. The family member who's overseas still gets to know what's happening in their child's life. And so for me, when I'm talking about technology, to get away from the concerns, I move into this create and communicate zone of technology. Personally, I really try to avoid consuming media unless I know it's from a very high quality source and unless I know it's from a source that I trust and value. So friends, this is where it becomes really important that you think about your role. You are driving the pedagogic bus. That means that you are making the intentional decisions with the children in your service. You are the one who decides when we use technology and how we use technology. The device, the app, the television screen in your house is not driving the pedagogic bus. You, the adult, are driving the bus, which means you need to be modeling really good tech use as well. And we're going to talk a lot more about that this evening. So friends, as I consider this idea of driving the pedagogic bus, I'd like to plant this idea. It's a big E, that when you're using technology, that you think about the E. And I will come back to this with a little E echo at the end of tonight's session as a reminder. The E means that we engage ethically and safely with technology. We only use the technology when it's engaging to children and when it is ethical to do that. And of course, we are always considering being safe in this space. We next only use the technology when it is extending children's thinking, extending their geographic boundaries, and extending their play and learning. For me, I only use technology if it is going to enrich children's lives. I don't want it to take away from their lives or be a digital worksheet. I want it to be enriching, adding value to their lives. And for me, most importantly, I will only use technology when it enables me to do something I can't do normally, or when it enables me to do something differently. So I don't tend to paint on a digital device. I can do that normally. Why would I do that? But I might record a child painting using some kind of camera device or perhaps a time lapse, so I can record their painting and then I can revisit that with the child. You see, painting in the real world is really valuable. Painting in the real world is something we want to do with children. Using the technology to paint doesn't add to it, but maybe recording the painting and coming back to revisit it does. Now, I'm hoping those of you who have been thinking about research are thinking, oh, that sounds like sustained shared thinking. And of course it does. It's where we engage children in that invitation to participate in learning, or as the EYLF 2.0 talks about, where we engage in assessment for learning and assessment as learning, where the child is part of that process. So friends, take a moment. Let's take a breather. I'm going to have a quick sip of my iced coffee. I'd like you to think about the technologies that have changed over your lifetime. Just take a moment, write something down. Think about what has changed over time for you. You see, historically, we are going through a constant technological evolution. And I don't know about you, but every now and then I turn into a history nerd and I think through how have things changed over time. So I promise this is not a pop quiz, but it might be something that's interesting to you if you're equally nerdy as I am. I'm going to think through the history of light and I'm going to think through the history of mark making. All right, let's think about light. Does anyone have any idea when we started using torches? And by torches, I mean literally flames stuck on a wall. Did they come before candles or after candles? Do you know? Have you thought about it? Yeah, okay. You probably haven't thought about this as much as I have. I'm such a nerd in this space. Friends, obviously the first light source that we used, apart from daylight and the moon, were torches. And these torches were held up and used to light the space we were in. We used fire as our lighting source. We then moved on to candles, and yes, candles came well after fire torches. Candles, of course, is where we were able to tame the fire using a wick. But believe it or not, globes were not invented, and by globes I mean electric light globes. They were not invented until 1879. And yes, I did have to check on my notes for that one. Almost immediately after, in fact, only 20 years after, we developed the handheld torches. But I don't know about most of you. For me nowadays, this is the torch I use, the light on my camera. And you might not know, but that light camera device wasn't invented as a torch until the 2000s. So it's a really new invention. Either way, we've seen the evolution of how we consider light. All right, let's think about mark making. Obviously, mark making started as we made marks in the natural world, cave painting, etc. We then started using other devices such as the quill, and obviously cave painting was millions and millions and millions of years ago. Interestingly, in the 1400s, we invented the printing press. And do you know the furor we have about technology and that iPads are killing childhood was the same furor that happened when the printing press was invented. Everyone was concerned that access to printed materials would destroy the social fibre that we were a part of. It amazes me that we have so many of the same concerns. As we think further about mark making, the pencil was only invented in 1938, and the biro, the pencil was invented in 1838, and the biro 100 years later in 1938. But now very few of us use these devices in our mark making. Instead, we're often more likely to type content. And the first home PC came about in Australia in the 1970s. There were computers a lot longer than that before that, but the home PC really became affordable in the 1970s. Now, this is really important information because we've literally travelled millions of years in this evolution of mark making. And for me, the iPad, the phone, and the tablet device are a further evolution of something that has been taking millions of years. So for those of you who aren't familiar, we only had the iPad available since 2010, and it's really changed the way many of us take notes and mark make. Guys, you're probably thinking, why is this woman prattling on about history? Well, I'm prattling on about history because we've been going through a constant evolution. Susie Edwards, the very gorgeous Professor Susie Edwards from Australian Catholic University, talks about this as we've been through 3 generations of technology use. Now, she's, in this particular research article, really unpacked the history of what we do with technology and really helped us to understand that as early childhood teachers, as early childhood educators in whatever setting you're in, that we've been really through 3 different distinct time periods. The first one she talks about is Generation 1, where we had a should we use technology or not use technology debate. This is where, as teachers, we really thought carefully of, do we use it or not? This idea really gave us the idea of a debate, that we had this choice. The second generation moved into the notion of digital play. And now digital play is acknowledged as a legitimate form of play. And indeed, as we look at the EYLF 2.0, we'll see digital play as a component in that space. The third generation, which is where we're heading to now, is this idea of the post-digital. What we acknowledge now is that the technology is there. It might be on our wrist or perhaps be on our phone, but that children are immersed in a digital society. Now, what that means is that we, as educators, need to be making active engagements in this space. It's no longer an option to say, we're not going to use technology. For most Australian families, they are using technology, and what they need guidance on is how do we use technology well. So for me, this brings particular needs where we need to think about our pedagogies, we need to think about the theories we're using, and most importantly, we need to be building skills so that children can be safe in the online space. Now, friends, I have a couple of more tiny bits of theory, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. I hope that's okay with you. You see, as we reflect on technology use in our contexts, it's really important that we think about what skills we are bringing to this. If you remember right back to the beginning where we asked you how confident you felt using technology, some of us don't feel so confident. So this theoretical idea comes from Mishra and Kohler, and it's been around a long time. This one's from 2006. And Mishra and Kohler talk about this idea of TPAC. As educators, we have good pedagogic knowledge. We know how to teach, how to engage, how to build activities that children want to participate in. We know about the importance of serve and return to build language. We know about the brilliance of a beautiful book. As teachers, we know how to teach. We know how to talk to children and how to work with them. We also generally feel confident with what to teach. And this, in Mishra and Kohler's world, is called content knowledge. So if you have a child who's interested in numbers, you know that you can go forth and engage in this idea of exploring numbers in the real world. Likewise, if you've got a child who's really interested in dinosaurs, then you might bring out some books that extend that thinking. So as educators, we have a strong pedagogy, we know how to teach, and we have a strong content knowledge, we know what to teach. The challenge then is when we add technology, because technology amplifies practice and extends practice. So what Mishra and Kohler talk about is this idea of TPAC, where we want to get into that middle section where we have pedagogy and content as our foundation, and then we use the technology to extend those ideas. Another way to think about this comes from the work of Putundura, who talks about SAMAR. And when we're thinking about SAMAR, the first step is substitution, where you use the tech to substitute something. So in our amazing video with Joss, she uses that technology to substitute books that she doesn't necessarily have in her home. So she gives a great example of using technology and using YouTube videos to watch books, which is such a lovely example. We can also use the technology to augment our practice. So that might be if you have a child who speaks additional languages, perhaps you will use books presented in other languages. SAMAR then talks about when we use technology to transform our practice, where we modify our thinking and use the technology to really significantly change what we do. So for me, that's when we turn around from reading books into creating books. And of course, we could do that in the real world, and we can do that digitally. And then Putundura talks about this idea of redefining what we're doing, changing things up to do things that we previously couldn't do. One example of that for me occurs when we connect with astronauts in outer space. And yes, believe it or not, via NASA, you can connect with astronauts who are on the space station. Isn't that a true example of redefining our family daycare, where we really go beyond our gates into space? Now, guys, I'm not asking you to know this theory, but sometimes it's just a really helpful tool to reflect on what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's also a helpful way for you to consider, where are you at in your practice? How confident do you feel in this space? So, friends, as you know, the EYLF and My Time Our Place were updated. They were updated really recently. And what I'm fascinated with is the changes in the technology space. You see, the new documents really acknowledge that children are actively engaged with technology and media, and that part of our job in early childhood is to really extend their thinking and to acknowledge that media is part of their lives, that there is a digital playground, as it were. That's my language, not the language from the EYLF. But what it encourages us to consider is that as teachers, we have to understand the digital worlds that children are engaging in. I'll give some examples of that in a few moments where we explore this in practice. I'd also encourage you to have a look at how many times technology is mentioned. And you can do that by just doing a quick search, Control F. It's my favourite way of finding things in the documents. And in this quick example, I've just Control F for technology. And look how many times technology is occurring in outcome 5 in both of those documents. So ironically, we're on page 63, but you can really see that technology or technologies is a part of what we're doing in our work with young children. What this acknowledges for me is that we are starting to live in a technological society, and that as teachers that we have to play a role in that space. Now, I'd really encourage you to look at the approved learning frameworks and particularly to look at the glossary of terms. The glossary of terms there really helps us to define technologies and digital technologies, and also helps us to define media. Now, you don't have to use technology, you don't have to use media, but hopefully tonight's session is helping you really think through, well, when could I use technology and when could I use media, to recognise this as part of children's worlds and to extend upon it in a pedagogically appropriate way. I'm going to summarise this again for us. And this really comes from research that I've done for a long time, including some work with my amazing friend, Christy Goodwin. For me, this is where we as teachers really consider how we work intentionally with media, with technologies, where we think through what is best for the children that we are working with. So this is my abridged version. It's where we make active decisions, where we choose when children are consuming, when they're creating, and when they're communicating. And this framework is what I'll come back to tonight. All right, couple more things. Firstly, I want to come back to keeping children safe online. Now, friends, keeping children safe is an essential part of the role that we play, and this is mentioned in many parts of the national law and the regulations. It's part of what we do in our environments, and therefore it's part of what we do when we are taking children online. This means that we are protecting our children from any harm or hazard in the real world, as well as when we're posting their documents in the virtual space. So when we're looking at family daycare, or when we're conducting our annual risks assessments, we need to be also considering the risks of technology use. How many people tonight have a Facebook group of educators that they work with, or perhaps a Facebook group with their families? How many of you are posting TikToks? How many of you are sharing ideas on Instagram? And believe it or not, lots of family daycare educators do, and not all of them have considered locking down their accounts so that only their families can see it. You see, friends, you are the ones that control the online space and control what people can see into your service. So really thinking about what you are sharing and what is safe is vital here. So ASIQA, in partnership with all governments around Australia, has developed a new model code of conduct. The model code of conduct and guidelines helps us, the teachers, promote a child-safe environment when it comes to taking, sharing and storing images and uploading them online, whether that's uploading them to an email to send to families or uploading them to a digital documentation platform. Children have the right to experience quality education and a physically safe environment. We, as educators, have to be compliant with child safety legislation, and as educators, we play such a vital role in identifying risks that children can come to. So as family daycare educators, I want you to really think carefully about how you're sharing information online and whether you're sharing it in a way that's safe. Now, we do not have to agree to the model code of conduct. Family daycare at the moment is outside of the scope of this legislation that's being proposed, and in particular the model code that's being trialled at the moment. But it is absolutely something that we need to be aware of, and something that we need to consider when we're working with children, and in particular when we are sharing the information with families. So friends, I'd like you to take a moment and reflect on the images that you are taking of children, and I'd like you to think about why are they important. In particular, when you are capturing images, what are you capturing? Is it respectful? Is it ethical? Is it important? For me, I actually feel that my child's hands, or just capturing what they're doing, is often more powerful than a happy smiling face. I don't want a posed photo. What I'd much rather is to see my child doing something. You see, as soon as we post a photo of a face, we are posting identifiable features. And so I'd like you to consider very carefully about what you are sharing. And I'd like you to consider about what is being stored on your devices. As part of the Model Code of Conduct in long day and preschool services, we don't want teachers to use their own devices. Now, most of us in family daycare do use our own device. If you have access to a spare device, that would be the safest option for you. If you don't have access to a spare device, I'd like you to think about who else could see your photos, who else has access to them. Are you sharing your photos with multiple devices, and have you considered that? I'd also encourage you, in fact, it's really vital that you consider, has the family and the child given consent? A child who does something like this and looks away from the camera is implying that they don't want to be part of a photo. So I actively ask children, could I take a photo of this and share it with mum or dad? Would you be okay if we took a photo? Now, interestingly, right from our tiniest babies, we're able to see that often they are able to give consent in this space. You also need to consider who else is viewing this item. If you, in your family, have a shared family album, there's a risk that you could be taking photos that your whole family could see. So check in your device settings. Check that only you and the families or children that are in your family daycare service can see. I particularly love when my family daycare services have an old phone that no one else can access, that old phone that only they are able to use. And you can even use a phone that's not connected to the internet. It's a great way of taking photos and using them to reflect back to children without keeping any of those risks. I'd also encourage you, if you have school-age children attending your service, to consider the devices that they bring to your services and what they are accidentally capturing. Now, guys, we've gone into the negative again. This is not to say that we shouldn't be taking photos. It's that we should be considering about how we take photos and how we do this really ethically. This is really important for me, and it's something that I want you to consider as we move forward in that space. If you'd like to read more about the Model Code of Conduct, I have put some of that in the booklet for you so that you can be aware. I've also put some great links to other resources that help children stay safe online. If you've got your device with you, you can access that straight away through this QR code, where you can read about ASIQA's new, agreed by every state and territory, model code that takes a step towards promoting a child-safe culture when we're taking photos. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. You can also Google that just by looking at ASIQA model code, and it's about child safety. Now, friends, this is only one part of what we do in keeping children safe, but I hope it's something that you'll consider in your practice moving forward. So, talking about practice, we are going to jump in and hear from the amazing Joss. So, friends, join with me as we hear from Joss, who is a brilliant family day educator from Dubbo.
Hello, lovely Joss. I'm so grateful that you could join us this evening. You're joining us from Dubbo. I'm in Canberra on Ngunnawal lands, but tell us about Dubbo. Where are you from?
So as you said, I'm in Dubbo on lovely Wiradjuri land, and I've been working in family daycare. This is my 5th year. So
fantastic. And tell us about your home. Tell us about what you do in your service.
So I live just out of Dubbo on some rural acreage. So we have all the lovely farm animals and that we can go visit in my service. So I have a separate purpose-built area for my family daycare. So we call it play care. So I have my youngest play care child is 14 months and my oldest is 4.5.
Oh, it's so special.
I just do the before school age. I've done all that where you do before and after school care and realised that this is my niche. Just doing the before school is more than enough. But yeah, I absolutely love family daycare. I love the opportunities for the relationships that just you can't match in a service environment. I love the connection with my families. I love the connection with our landscapes and going on excursions. And yeah, I'm a very passionate family daycare educator.
Well, that is a very wonderful thing, my friend. So tonight we're here to talk about tech. So let's start that conversation. Have you got any examples of how you've integrated technology that might have helped you with admin or perhaps with communicating with parents?
Yeah, so I do use a digital app to communicate with parents via like learning stories, uploading photos. I also put different reports, like if there's been an incident or anything, I just upload everything. And I think at the end of the day, every day I'll do just a quick photo story, how we played today, and just put the photos for the day so that parents have the opportunity to sit down at the end of the day and look through what they've been doing, because it's always that question when your kid gets home and you ask, oh, what did you do today? Nothing. So it's just giving parents the opportunities for those moments of connection at the end of the day. And then also, obviously, you're doing your learning stories on each child where you can link to the early years learning framework or the national quality standards and all that. But yeah, just making sure that parents can always access that information when they're ready for it. Particularly when you've got young babies, I find it's really, really useful to be able to record all their nappy changes, all their bottles, when they slept, when they woke up, because trying to download that information at the end of the day, you can tell the parent and then they get home and they've forgotten, and it just saves them having to go, oh, what did Joss say? When was that? So they can just open up the app, have a quick look and go, okay, they woke up then, that means I need to put them to bed now. Just those bits of information that are really useful. And when they're settling in, just the photos as well, just to be able to say, look, they were a little bit sad this morning, but here's a photo of them, they're playing happily. So then mum's not at work worrying all day that her baby is upset.
It really helps with that partnership piece, doesn't it?
It really does. And it helps build trust really quickly with your parents as well, because they can see everything that you're doing for their child in the course of the day. So I've found it really valuable to be able to integrate that.
Okay, well, one of the other things, so we talk about using technology with, for, and by children. So the digital documentation is using technology for the families, for the children. But if we think about an example of when you've used technology with the children, is there something lately that has really excited you in your practice?
I think when we've been doing our safety drills is one example. So I have an app on my phone. It's part of our service policy that alerts me if there's a hazard such as a bushfire within our watch zone, so I know if we've got to evacuate.
In Canberra, I don't have to think about that, but for your context, that's really important.
Yeah, that's it, because we're on a 50-acre property surrounded by bushland, so we don't want to be stuck here if there's a bushfire just down the road. And we actually have had a couple of instances where we have had to check and move quite quickly. But one of the things that the children have picked up, because when I'm explaining our practice with our fires, and I'll say to them that I'll get an alert through on my phone and it tells us if the fire's too close and it's not safe for us to stay at play care and we need to go. So a few weeks ago, when the winter fire season started, one of my little girls could smell some smoke in the air, and she said, "Oh, Jossie, can you open your app and see where the fire is?" And so we did, and we can see you can zoom out to see the whole state if you want to. So when we have the firebombing aircraft at the local airport and there's a big fire, we can sort of watch where the fire is that they're going to and things like that. But it was just really exciting to be able to see that child put the connections together, that I know that if I smell smoke, I can check where the danger is so that I know that I'm safe.
And
so that was...
It's a really complex example of technology, because it's using your geolocation and a map overlay and extra information all being distributed through an app. Well, that's a really complex understanding of this being a tool for you to use.
Yeah.
It's a great example.
So that was really exciting. Sometimes when you sit back and you get those light bulb moments, you're just like, their brains are just incredible the way that they work.
Now, you mentioned something else around using books, that you don't have a library of 16,000 books. And so you've found a good way to access extra content online.
Yeah, so when we're focusing on a particular topic or wanting to include diverse perspectives, using online recordings of books has been a really great way, cost-effective way of being able to access those titles and give children the opportunity to have those different perspectives in their literary environment. Because, as you said, I mean, as an educator, I can't afford to buy every book that I wish that I could. I've already got that many books that I can't store them all in here. So I've kind of had to limit myself to stop buying new books. But being able to access them digitally is something that's been really beneficial, because then you can also pair it with all your general comprehension questions and sequencing activities and things like that that you would do with an ordinary book. You can still do that with a digital book. It's just somebody other than me is reading it. So they're still getting that practice of sitting and listening to a story, but they're also understanding that it's not just watching the book. They need to be engaging with it and thinking about what's happening and remembering the storyline so that they can ask and answer the questions after.
Now, a lot of people are concerned about technology being an isolating thing, that, you know, children using a small device by themselves might be socially isolated. So in the book experience, are you all gathering round one computer, or how are you getting it so that multiple people can have that joint point of attention in your setting?
So we utilise a smart TV. So in that instance, we can gather as a group and watch the same story all together on the screen. There's also obviously the opportunities then, if there's something on your phone, you can cast it to the screen so that everybody can see it in a decent size as well. And it also then it stops little fingers trying to tap, 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 tap. But it just makes it a bit more, they're part of the space instead of condensed over a screen as well.
It's such a good example there of, you know, casting photos up. You could use that to revisit the day. There's so many options there, aren't there?
Yeah, definitely. And like incorporating things like your mindfulness guides, where you might be doing your finger breathing, and that you can have the visuals on the screen as you prompt, so you can be there doing it with the children as well, instead of having to be watching and doing the leading. You can participate. Same with yoga, things like that. There's lots of different opportunities that to incorporate expertise that you don't have. I mean, I'm not a yoga teacher, so I'm not going to be teaching kids yoga, but I love doing it. But that's where you can bring in those experts to help with things like mindfulness and all those things that are important for well-being.
It really builds your repertoire, doesn't it? It's exciting. All right, I'm going to have one more question for you, my friend. Have you got any advice for educators who haven't really engaged in the tech space but are just dipping their toes in? Is there anything that they should do or anything they should avoid? Any advice?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that tech is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We are educating kids who are part of a digital age, and our new EYLF framework tells us that we need to be giving children the opportunity to engage with technology in a meaningful way. And I think we see these kids for a lot of their life. When you think about it, if we have a child in our care 3, 4, 5 days a week, those waking hours are probably the majority of the time that it's us that are inputting how to engage in society, how to, become part of the culture that we live in. So I think giving them the opportunity to see how technology can be meaningful for them and how to use it helpfully and healthfully, I think is our responsibility as educators. So I think we need to get away from being scared that any screen is bad. I think we've just got to make sure that the way we're utilising it is educational and not where children are parked in front of it with their brain in neutral. That's not learning, and that's not what technology and education is about. So I think there's so many opportunities to just dip your toe in the water, even if you start off with participating in things like simultaneous story time. That's a great way of integrating digital opportunities into your curriculum. There's so many organisations that are offering different ways for educators to access resources and just dip their toes in the water. I think, it's not something that we need to be scared of. And I think if you're using it to better the learning experience of children, then parents see the value in it. I've never had a negative conversation about the use of screens because they know that there's a purpose to it. It's not a babysitting service, and I think that's the biggest thing is you've got to be able to think through it from a parent's perspective and go, what would I be expecting my child to get out of this experience? And we're not using technology to get 5 minutes peace. That's not what it's about. It's there to augment learning that is taking place already, but you're just ramping it up and giving the children that additional perspective of how technology can be integrated and enhance the experience that they're already having.
Oh, Joss, you couldn't have said it more perfectly from my perspective. I'm really interested in that idea of being intentional with our tech use. So that was the most perfect summation. Next time I'm in Dubbo, I'd love to come and visit. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My absolute pleasure.
Don't you love that I invited myself to Joss's house? Isn't that terrible? I should not have done that. But Joss, you are amazing, and your use of technology is so thought-provoking. So friends, please join with me in saying thank you to Joss virtually for her work tonight. And I'm thrilled that she's in the room as well. So Joss, amazing work with technology. Now, Joss has not, to my knowledge, used the Early Childhood Australia Statement on Young Children and Digital Technologies. She may have, but what I love about her work with technology is that she has really thoughtfully considered all of the elements within this statement. Now, Early Childhood Australia is currently reviewing this statement, which is very exciting to me as a tech researcher. And they're currently thinking through whether this is still relevant. This was developed a few years ago, about 2017 or 18. And so there is a current review going on. But the 4 areas that this document speaks to me, are incredibly powerful. So first and foremost, it says that if we are using technology with children, we need to use it in a way that promotes good relationships. We also need to make sure that we are facilitating children's citizenship in a digital world, so that we need to give them a chance to understand, what does this look like and what does this mean? We also need to be helping children to be healthy and well, that we need to consider health and well-being in a digital space. And last of all, that if we are using technology, we need to use it in a way that promotes effective play and pedagogy. And in those gorgeous examples from Joss, you could really see that she'd thought about how to use technology to promote safety, that she didn't show videos that she hadn't previewed, that she always made sure she'd check them first, and that the pedagogies that she was engaging with were about intentionality and really thinking that through. So Joss, amazing work in that space. Now, friends, if you'd like to read more about Early Childhood Australia's statement on young children and digital technologies, it goes into a lot of detail. And I'm just going to show one around relationships, where we talk about the principle of young children's relationships and with adults and peers in a digital space. And you can see that there's a principle at the top, and then very simply some practice advice to consider. That practice advice is the part that I love, because it really helps remind us about what we're doing and why we're doing it. This document is a free download, and I've included a link to that in the booklet that you've received. Now, if you haven't received the booklet, just email Family Daycare New South Wales and they'll send you out a copy, or of course you can view it on the website. So we're getting ready. Are you ready for some playtime? I'm going to quickly tell you a few stories and then literally show you how to do it. This is one of my favourite stories of a little girl called Jem, and Jem was really interested in sunflowers. And what she noticed was that little section in the inside of the sunflower. Now, I'm not sure that you've taken time lately to look closely at a sunflower, but this little girl did. She was 3 at the time, and she attached one of these amazing bits of kit. This is a magnifying glass, and it clips on to your camera lens, obviously depending on the type of camera you have. And they come in a little kit, a little bit like this. But look at that photo. Isn't that incredible? You can also have one of these, and this is exactly the same thing. It clips onto your device, and this turns your camera on your device into a monocular, so you can see at a distance. What I love about that is that it's enabling us to look more closely, enabling us to look at something in a different way. And yes, I'll show you this in a moment. Another example of that comes from this, where I've filmed an experiment, and I filmed it on a day where not all children are there. And I wanted the children who were there later in the week to still see that experiment. This experiment, of course, uses capillary action and takes about 2 hours to happen. But you can see in my time lapse of that I've sped things up. Now, I won't watch the whole video with you, but this is a really simple tool on your camera, and almost every device has a time lapse function. And you can see here that I've sped up about 3 hours of time of capillary action into a very short video. Now, friends, the power of a photo is immense, and this gorgeous photo of a child exploring small world play with animals is really powerful. It's a powerful opportunity for us to go back and revisit learning with children and to invite children into that space where they can tell us what they are learning about. Now, what I love about that photo there is that there's no identifying features. Yes, mum or dad would know who it was, but to the outside world, there's no safety risk here. We're not concerned about sharing a child's identity online. Now, this ability to come back and revisit is incredibly powerful. And Iram Siraj Blatchford refers to this idea as sustained shared thinking, where we sustain and share in children's thinking. The power of a photo is incredible, especially when we invite children back into the space. Now, this particular teacher I love because she's also integrated children's media in the space. And you might see in the front there that in the Small World play that there's a couple of little Paw Patrol characters in there. In this particular context, the Paw Patrol characters became a way to help a child transition into the space. The teacher really carefully thought about the fact that she didn't want to be showing Paw Patrol videos, but she recognised that one of the children in her family day were really interested in Paw Patrol. And so she took the characters and enabled them to be part of the Small World play. I love that they're sneakily in there. Now, what fascinates me about that as a researcher is that the Paw Patrol videos became part of that child's book narrative. They were part of the child's language and part of their understanding of the world. They knew that the family day that they were in was a safe space and that there was familiar elements, including, believe it or not, their children's media. Taking this further, this is a video that my daughter has asked me to share. And this particular one, we're not using time lapse to speed things up. In fact, we're using another aspect of our camera where we're slowing things down. In this case, we're slowing down her slide. I'd like to slow that down further because she was 2 days out of a cast, having had a broken arm in this video. But what I love about this is that capturing children's activity in the real world, their physical activity, is actually a powerful tool. Now, if you haven't used your phone lately, I'd love for you to jump into your device and see what the camera offers. Have a look at what options there are for you to use and have a consideration of what might be available for you. There are also apps that take this further, things like green screen apps that allow you to enter into the digital space. And in the booklet, I've put some examples of that. In particular, I've used an app called Green Screen by Do Ink. Green Screen by Do Ink allows you to become, using green screen technology, part of the action. Now, in my office, I can't demonstrate green screen on Zoom live, but I have put a video link for that for you in the booklet. So friends, if you can bear with me, I would like to share some examples of this and what it looks like. So I'm going to quickly share my display and hopefully you will see me connecting up my iPad in the real world. Let's see if we can make this work. Fingers crossed. Have you got your fingers and toes crossed, friends? I've got my fingers and toes crossed as well, because we really want the technology to work for us tonight. So friends, let's share my screen again so that you can see what is happening as we engage with our mobile devices. So tonight I'm connecting up an iPad, but this literally could be any screen that you were sharing. Don't you love it when the technology works in the practice session, but not in the real session? Goodness, hopefully we're seeing my iPad now. Ethan, can you see my iPad? Ethan's my amazing tech friend in the background and he's been helping me tonight. So hopefully you can send me a quick text, Ethan, to let me know that you can see it. Fingers crossed. Oh, yes, I got the good, looking good. Fabulous. So friends, I am now in my iPad and I'd love to just quickly show you that camera function that we were just mentioning. You can see here that I can scroll around down on the right-hand side to see different types. I'm now going to quickly clip in my microscope in there and hopefully you can see my magnifying glass. And let's have a closer look at this leaf. Now I'm using a macro lens here, and I've just clipped it on while I'm in that camera function. Isn't that incredible that I can take a photo and then I can even zoom in further to start to look at the leaf and the minutiae of a leaf? Isn't that incredible, friends? I'll take that macro lens off and instead look at other ways we can use our device. This time round, I'm using an augmented reality app to augment myself. Yep, believe it or not, I can give myself a quick crown. I think I need a crown. Oh, let's see if I can give myself a pink beard. Yep, I definitely need to do that. Now, before you think, why are we using augmented reality with children? Well, part of living in the digital world is understanding what happens when we add in filters and ideas. And yes, friends, I will show you all of these apps in a moment. The next app I'd like to share with you is an app called Book Creator. And Book Creator allows us to create books quickly and easily. I'm going to jump in and make a square book. This time round, I'm going to use the plus button. Can you see in that top right-hand corner those options of a plus button? And I can use the photos that I've taken earlier of my leaf. There it is. Let's use that leaf photo in there. I'll add a new page in, and this time round, I'm going to use my pen and I'm going to quickly draw in, using my stylus, an image of that leaf. Now, it's not quite the leaf, but I'm sure that some of your children will draw in elements like this where they're noticing something interesting in that space. Now, friends, I can also add in typed text and I can record sound. So I'm just going to quickly add in some typed text here, just so that you can see how quickly and easily we can pop that in. Now, once I've added in my typed text, if I want to edit it in any way, shape or form, I can use that I button and then make it larger, make it smaller, change the color, etc. I can also move it around in the page. Now, at the moment, I've only made a 2-page book, but I'm hoping what you can see here is how quickly and easily you can literally make a digital book. Now, Book Creator 1 is a free app. It allows you to create one book, but Book Creator paid, which is the version I personally prefer to use, allows you to make an unlimited amount of books. And what's great about that is that you have the option of exporting your book, sharing it out with families as a PDF, or even exporting it as a video. In particular, what I love about that is that I can make lots of different books and share them and revisit them. There's another app that's remarkably like Book Creator. This one's called Explain Everything, and literally it allows you to explain everything. What's neat about Explain Everything is that I've got this option of hitting record down the bottom, and once I hit record, I can draw and add in information and including audio as well as the live drawing that I've created. So just then I super quickly drew in a heart, and hopefully if I hit play on the bottom here, and once I hit record, I can draw and add. There you go. You saw it replaying in real time. Now, for our youngest children who are learning about mark making, that's a really powerful way to revisit. A couple more apps that are my absolute favorites. This one is called Universal Zoom, and it allows you to zoom all the way in to the size of a human embryo. We can go further into the size of a red blood cell. It also allows us to zoom into outer space. So we'll go back to the size of a human, and this time we'll zoom out into the broad world. Remember, we talked about using tech to enable us to do something differently. This enables me literally to jump into space and see what's happening in the planetary world. Now, before you say, Kate, my children aren't interested in space, well, if they're not interested in space, we don't go into space with them. If they are interested in space, that's when we can take this further and go into that new area. You see, as teachers, you are the ones driving that pedagogic bus. So you, my friends, are the ones that we need to be taking care to decide when it's appropriate to use and to choose which apps that you want to engage in. So the first app I showed you there came from your camera, and in particular, I want you to look at slow-mo and time-lapse. I love those clip-on magnifying glasses, and my favourite ones came from Ted's Photographics. They're not expensive, friends. You just have to check that you've got the right clip-ons for your device. We also have a range of really cheap ones from Kmart. And of course, you can go to the more expensive clip-on magnifying glasses that are digital. I haven't shown you stop motion or green screen tonight, but stop motion allows you to create mini animations super quickly and super easily. And if you look at the booklet, there's a link to how to do both of those in there. We have very quickly made a 2-page book with Book Creator, and I'd really encourage you again to look at the links in my resource book, because I've given you a how-to use that tool. So if it's new to you, hopefully you'll have a chance to revisit that. Explain Everything is that other app, and I was using Explain Everything Basics that enabled me to make marks and record those marks in real time. You see, there's power in the audio, that child talking about what they're doing. Explain Everything is also great for us as educators, as we're explaining ideas and sharing them. But before you think, oh, Kate, I don't want to pay for those apps, I'm actually sure that most of you have PowerPoint, because in PowerPoint, you too are able to create many of those digital books just on your PC or your laptop that you've got in your centre. Now, as family daycarers, sometimes the cost-effective tool is the most important one. And so PowerPoint, where you can record photos and particularly record using the capture tool to record videos, might be a powerful way of creating digital books in your service. A couple of other apps that I really love. I showed Lightspace 3D. That's that fun one that allows you to augment your face and create your own filters so you can become a fairy princess with those lights around you. Another one that's really lovely for our younger learners is the Very Hungry Caterpillar augmented reality version, and that creates an augmented caterpillar that literally crawls around your desk or your service. I touched on Universal Zoom, which is a brilliant app to zoom in or zoom out. I don't think we got to look at the human body by TinyBot, but if you have a child who's really interested in what's happening in their body, this is a great way to look at the digestive system and the respiratory system and why we clean our teeth. For those of you wanting some screen-free technologies, my favourite robotics toys are these two here. The Bluebot, which is a brilliant robotic toy that's been around for a whole heap of years, more than 10, and a more recent tool, a TinyBot, that comes with a little remote control that allows you to program your tiny robot to move around the space. Friends, sometimes screen-free tech, such as robotics, is a really good way to engage children in the process of how things are made. And coding a robot to move through space or coding a tiny bot to have different facial expressions helps put the child in the space where they are making the technology rather than consuming someone else's content. For those of you who would really like something that's not screen-based, ABC Kids Listen and ABC's Imagine This are brilliant podcasts. They are absolutely amazing to listen to and even brilliant for you to build your own pedagogic content knowledge. Now, friends, I have jumped through a whole heap of technology that has amazing affordances, but I'm aware through the questions a couple of you are still worried in the background, so I want to give you some things to read further before we finish up for tonight. Firstly, the eSafety Commissioner has some amazing resources for you to consider. The eSafety Commissioner has some safety tools for you to think about as an adult, but also to think about with children. I've again put a link to that in the booklet for you. There's also a brilliant website called Young Children in Digital Society, which is where you can read more about the work of Susie Edwards and look at some of those really healthy use of technologies. Young Children and Digital Technologies, Young Children and Digital Society is a website built by researchers, including myself, with some brilliant practices to try out. There is also another resource. This one came from the Alana and Madeline Foundation and a range of academics, and this one's called Playing IT Safe or Playing It Safe. This has some amazing tools, activities and ideas to consider when using technology with children, including a brilliant one about advertising and how to recognise when something's advertising. It's also got some great activities that you might like to try with your children about 4 years of age, around who are we sharing with and how are we staying safe online. There is also, of course, Australian Research Council Centre of Research Excellence called Young Children or the Digital Child, which gives you some brilliant resources on how to stay safe in this rapidly changing world. Now, friends, I'm going to finish up now with a quick reminder. You are driving the pedagogic bus. You are driving the digital bus. So make sure as you drive this bus, you drive it with care, where you think through the E. How are you engaging ethically and safely? How are you using technology to extend children's thinking and extend their ideas? Maybe you're connecting with another service in a different town or area to you, where you're extending geographic boundaries. How are you using the technology to enrich children's lives? Are you capturing amazing photos of their Lego constructions, or perhaps you're using it to time-lapse children in building their physical skills, making sure that we're not taking away from their real world, but using it to enrich their real world? And lastly, how are you using technology to enable you to do something you can't do normally, or enabling children to do something differently, like creating a digital book? Friends, there are a few questions in the question box, but I think almost all of that information has been answered in the booklet. I'm more than happy to connect further with you if you'd like any additional information, and my contact details are also in the booklet. So thank you for joining me tonight. I hope this session has been helpful as you consider PD in your pocket. If you are looking for further information, don't forget to participate in the PD in your pocket Facebook group. I'm a bit excited to be in there as well. So if you've got a question I haven't answered, I'll make sure I check in that space and answer those questions for you there. I'd like to particularly acknowledge that this session has been brought to you with thanks from the New South Wales Government. And of course, please make sure you give some really good feedback in that survey. If there's something I've done that's annoyed you, let me know. Or if there's something you'd like more information, of course, we'd love to hear about that too. Thanks for joining us tonight. I look forward to seeing you in the Facebook group if you're not already there.